Hi there, I'm Nick, I'm autistic, and I also have ADHD. Now, I had to have a meeting at college today. Like I've said before, I don't attend lectures, I work remotely, and I have one-on-one meetings with my lecturer when required. I'm at the pointy end of study now, and this is the hard part for me. I'm fine with the sciencey stuff, the research, the field work, the writing of reports. All that's okay. But the client consultancy bits, that's another story. So that made me think, what are suitable careers for neurodiverse people? Can a neurodivergent person hold down a job, successful career? Yes, but with accommodations. And I think there are things that, you really have to watch out for. I mean, those of us who were late diagnosed, most of us probably have been working. How successfully we've been able to hold down a job or develop a career is another question. So today I'll talk about what I think some roles that would be challenging, and let you in and share with you a few things that I have done myself, some things that have worked and some things that haven't. Hopefully that will help. So the first one that comes to mind from my chat this morning was client-facing roles. Because we have the whole delayed processing issue and communication back and forth is difficult, client-facing roles are probably not a natural fit for an autistic person. Working in a factory or a noisy environment, now I could not imagine anything worse. And as an unemployed person, you do have to apply for whatever jobs are advertised. And about a year ago, this job was advertised locally. Again, I have difficulty travelling around, so it was local. So I had to apply for this job, and then I was told I had an interview. Oh my God, how am I going to do this? This is probably the worst possible job for me, working on a factory floor. I had no idea I was autistic, but I knew I didn't like noise. I didn't have a normal interview. It was basically a remote interview, a robot interview. As in, it was online, but there were no humans at the other end. I had to have my camera and microphone on, and then these questions would pop up at the bottom of my screen, and I'd be recorded answering these questions. Really, employers, that is not a nice way to recruit people. It's very off-putting. And I probably spent most of the time looking like a stunned mullet. I'm having to, like, what? Very odd. And I remember them asking me whether or not I like noise. And I said, absolutely not, not at all. Absolutely hate noise. Drives me completely bananas. Fritzes my brain out. Really don't like noisy environments. About half an hour later, I got a text message saying I was unsuccessful, which was good. As a late diagnosed individual, I have always managed to work. I think it's something we struggle with. I know personally that I have managed to push myself to my limits without understanding what's going on with me for many, many years. And, I never understood why I seem to be having so much more trouble than my peers. Now I understand, but, that's 30, 40 years of working and struggling and being completely confused and feeling utterly worthless and feeling like a failure and not understanding why I'd get really upset and emotional. And just stand up in the middle of a room and start shouting and crying and storming out because things were just too much to deal with. So yeah, I was like that weird emotional chick who worked over there in the corner. So I can tell you what is not suitable for me. Client-facing roles, difficult. Factories, difficult. When I was young, my family thought it would be good for me as a girl to be either a nurse or a secretary. Both careers were held in high regard and deemed respectable jobs for women, pre-marriage and subsequent breeding. As a girl guide, I volunteered at a local geriatric hospital every weekend for 2 years. That experience completely ruled out the nursing option. I have the greatest respect for nurses, but I'm an autistic person, so really? The whole physical contact, building a rapport thing with your patients, that was never going to work. I thought the idea of being a secretary sounded absolutely mind-numbingly boring. So I thought I might like to join the army instead. Now, I went through all the interview processes and everything, and they said, yep, okay, fine, provided you pass your physical, which I would have waltzed through, we can take you on. I said, oh, great. Can I join the infantry? And they looked at me and said, no, you're a woman. You're basically going to be, in admin or a nurse. Thank you very much, but I don't want to join the army then, because I don't want to be a nurse and I don't want to be a secretary. What I really wanted to do was to go to art college. But secretarial work in my family was considered something to aspire to. So my thoughts of going to art college were poo-pooed. No one makes any money out of creativity. No one has a career in the creative industries. And I was very well versed in compliance. As the eldest, it was considered to be my job to bring home the family bacon. So typing it would be. On and off, between marriages, raising kids, homeschooling, I worked in a variety of offices in a broad spectrum of industries, usually temp work. Now, my ADHD brain could not cope with this whole mundane business of full-time office work with all that boring typing and filing and stuff. And as offices became larger and more open plan, my autistic brain could not cope. Due to our sensory issues, any kind of work in an open plan, brightly lit environment is going to be an enormous strain on an autistic person. One of my ex-husbands was in retail and he wanted us to work together. That was his dream. To start with, my ADHD brain was quite excited by this new idea, despite the fact that I was currently working elsewhere. So my ADHD brain decided that the appropriate way to exit one employment and jump into a new venture was to turn up at work dressed in the new company colours. Now, the only thing I had to wear in the correct colour, because it obviously had to be the correct colour, was a figure-hugging dress with a thigh-high split. So to make it more appropriate for 9-to-5 office attire and announce my brand new career, my rather quirky brain thought it appropriate to cover myself in bumper stickers. Yep, you know, those sticky adverts that you put on the bumpers on the back of your car. I covered my nice sexy dress in bumper stickers for products that I would presumably be selling in my new career as a salesperson in a retail environment. So with my ADHD in full swing, I basically went around from section to section, desk to desk, and simply perched, cross-legged, thigh showing, on different people's desks, beamed inanely at them and handed them out business cards. Then management asked me to vacate the building and not come back. Then reality hit. ADHD decided to go quiet, and Autie me took over. So can you imagine how that went? An honest, open, logical ADHDer trying to sell a product. I am not able to have a normal back and forth conversation. I struggle to read people. I have to rely solely on scripts to communicate. People don't generally buy from robots citing facts in a monotone and staring off elsewhere. I was a very poor salesperson. I think that was the end of my ex-husband's dreams about working together. I did okay in logistics, behind the scenes, but only from a home-based office with a different husband. It required repetition, attention to detail, organisation, and was heavily scripted, including very precise emails. I mostly avoided the phone side of things and left that to him because he was very good on the phone. My ADHD brain found this quite tortuous. It's the same thing over and over, day in, day out. But the autistic side of my brain coped with it to a point. It froze when my husband made phone calls because I can't work if I've got audio interference. And I didn't like it when he moved around. My stress levels would go through the roof if he walked about, particularly if he's walking around wearing thongs or flip-flops, because the whole shloop, 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 shloop just fritzes out my brain. If I really had to concentrate, I'd have to take my laptop into another room and shut the doors and put headphones on because... So really, any external noise for me makes it almost impossible for me to work. Then we kind of broke up and I moved off to the country. Now, I was born and raised in the country because I couldn't handle the noise and the smell of the city and suburbs, so I just needed to get away and let's try and have a fresh start. But I needed income, and once again, a helpful family member suggested an option. Compliant me, well, she complied. I tried to run a B&B, bed and breakfast. An obvious choice, surely, for someone with no people skills who absolutely hates housework. Now, I had on my hands a beautiful property, 4 buildings, 12 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 4 kitchens, and almost an acre of garden to maintain. Alone, without any experience or knowledge of what I was doing. As usual, ADHD brain loves to just jump in and try something new, and became very enthused initially by the change and raced around getting everything ready. It built a website, sorted out all the online marketing, etc. Autie brain sorted out the operational side of things, wrote and practiced scripts for greeting and interacting with guests because it thought, well, it's not going to be that hard. You know, I had a script. Humans were obviously going to abide by this script because they're not really going to want to have a chat with me, are they? I mean, why on earth would they want to do that? They're coming away on holiday. So, you know, here's my greeting script. These are the instructions on what the humans should be doing. These are their rules. Everything is going to follow these precise rules, isn't it? Humans do not do that. Not at all. They have absolutely no respect for a strictly scripted holiday. Literal me really struggled with their requests. One occasion I had a large group of overseas visitors who had very little English, who kept just saying, history, history. So I thought they wanted to know the history. I didn't think that they would want to know the history of the property because there were lots of photographs up to explain that. There were even little plaques. So why would I need to explain the history of the property. Obviously, they needed to know the entire history of the town from the time of the early settlers. Having this language barrier, I thought, how do I do this? The answer is obviously to try and mime it, which I proceeded to attempt to do. Mime early settlers trying to arrive, mime them trying to build, mime them trying to, live in little huts, mime them getting married, mime them being pregnant, and pregnant again, and pregnant again, because back then people used to have an enormous amount of babies. So I would be waddling around pretending to be pregnant and groaning and giving birth and rocking other babies and then having other babies and like wandering around and meeting people and building more houses. And really, it is a most inefficient way to explain the founding of a town. And I had this whole group of bemused overseas tourists pausing, taking little videos, taking photos and nodding and, oh, history. History, thank you, history. And then wanting to take turns posing with me. I was exhausted. The laundry service was me. And I needed an enormous washing machine to cope with this many beds. The amount of hours ironing took out of each day was ridiculous. In a way, it soothed the autistic side of my brain, the repetition and the steam, but the ADHD part of me was less than impressed. The cleaner was me. The greeter and auto-smiler at humans was me. The disseminator of important local information was me. The gardener was me. The servant on call because I lived on site 24 hours a day was me. The cleaner-upperer of previously unimaginable amounts of bodily fluids and solids was also me. A peg on the nose and layers of gloves. This was not a fun job. It did not take too long before I really disliked humans. Running a bed and breakfast is not the romantic, relaxed work-from-home option that it may initially appear. There is no break, there is no personal time, there is no peace and quiet. So the garden became my refuge. I enjoyed that. I'd never had a garden before, but my special interests do not include gardening. They do include nature. They do include habitat building. And so the wildlife came. The humans queried my non-traditional B&B plant selection. Some shuddered at the proliferation of amphibians and recoiled at my reptilian friends. The possums, too, were a little bit of a problem, running around in the roofs at night. The birds were too noisy. Some humans would harm or kill my wildlife, then leave. This was unsustainable. I did not have the skills to deal appropriately with the humans, and I became completely burned out by the stress of it all. There were days when I would end up immobile on the floor, unable to acknowledge the presence of other people or what was happening around me. Frozen, mute, completely shut down. It got to the point where I had to close down the business. And 5 years later, I am still not working. And I am not in a position to do anything on a full-time basis. I can work for a couple of hours, then I'm knocked out. That was the final straw in many years of trying to work in situations that were completely unsuitable for someone like me. I'm still working out what I can do, what I am capable of, and accepting that I do have limitations. So I think whatever you do, you need to be passionate about it. It has to involve a special interest. If you have ADHD too, you need to be able to mix up the routine and the schedule, and you need to be able to build in time out for your poor autistic side, and be prepared that you might need a lot of that. So look for a job you can love with an employer that can accommodate your needs. And I know that that is not going to be an easy thing to ask. I don't think it's something I could have done when I was younger, even if I had been lucky enough to have received a diagnosis back then. Now I'm not afraid to ask. So all I can say is good luck on your employment journey. I hope you're able to find something. And I hope that there was something of assistance in this rather long ramble.